have chosen the best friend's brother as my anchor for this story. I am 36, a designer of small spaces and quieter joys, and the weekend away with my closest friend felt like a soft exhale after months of noise and schedules that crowded my lungs. He was her brother, the one she warned me about with a raised eyebrow and a smile that said, "Stay careful, kid. He is not your usual kind of safe." And I listened, even as I could not help but notice him. A man twice my age and freshly divorced, with a calm that moved through him like a breeze over a still lake. The plan for a low-key retreat, coffee, late-night talks, a cabin in the woods where the air smelled of pine and rain, felt safe, predictable, and exactly the kind of reset I claimed to want after a season of misfired messages and half-promises. I am not usually reckless, not in love or longing. But the moment I stepped into that quiet house and saw him at the kitchen table, the clock in the corner ticking in a steady, intimate rhythm, something inside me loosened, as if a knot I did not know I wore had finally found its space. He wore warmth the way some men wear jeans, unassuming, dependable, real, and his eyes, when they met mine, carried a light that had nothing to do with the lamp by the sofa. We started with polite questions, the sort of conversation that comes with a weekend tailor-made for easing into new surfaces. And I found myself telling him things I kept under lock and key in the past. My fear of making the wrong choice again, my hunger to love without apology, the ache of a life lived in careful corners. He listened, not with the indulgence of a man who tolerates, but with a respect that felt like a touch. A slow recognition of shared griefs and small losses that had hardened me into someone who forgot how to ask for more. It was nearly dusk before the unspoken settled between us. A spark neither of us noticed at first, but which grew with every cautious sentence, every confession whispered into the room where the rain began to drum softly on the roof. The first moment of danger did not come with a loud crash or a forbidden kiss, but with a single accidental touch, the brush of his hand against mine as we reached for a pan. The way his fingers lingered, not cruelly, but with a deliberate innocence that felt like a dare. The air seemed to thicken, the room shrinking to the sound of our breath and the distant thunder that rolled beyond the hills. And in that breathing space, I knew I was standing at the edge of a line I had sworn I would not cross. He spoke then of his divorce, of how he had learned to be alone again, to listen to his own heartbeat without fear. And I listened, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to understand the way a man who had believed in endings could still recognize a possibility at the moment when endings feel most tempting. The weekend carried us through long walks under a gray sky, through a kitchen where the coffee steamed in a steady mist, through a cinema of small glances and shared glances that did not pretend to be innocent. When we returned from a late stroll, the house seemed to lean in, and in that gentle leaning, I felt a gravity I had not anticipated. A gravity toward a man who was not mine to keep, whose life had moved past the easy rhythms of mine, and yet who drew me toward a future that felt dangerously clear. The inciting night came not with a shout, but with a single sentence that tugged at the strings of every resistance I had built around my heart. We stood at the door of the cabin, the rain tapping a steady soft drum on the wood, and he said his goodbyes with a tenderness that almost frightened me, an acknowledgement of what could be, of what we could become if we allowed ourselves to forget the boundaries we had promised to hold. Inside, I whispered to myself that this was a betrayal I could not afford, a risk that would fracture not only me, but the thin line I walked between loyalty and longing. And yet, when the door closed behind me, the house seemed smaller, the air heavier, and I found my words failing as I tried to tell my own heart to back away. The truth, when it finally broke from me, sounded almost like a confession, and in that confession I discovered a truth I had never given myself permission to voice. I was tired of pretending that ordinary love, steady love, could fix a life that felt incomplete. The next morning we spoke as if nothing had changed, and perhaps nothing had, except the way gravity shifted between us, the way a look could carry more heat than a dozen conversations. He kept his distance, not from me, but from the danger that lingered in the corners of his gaze. And I respected him for it, even as the ache returned with a sharper edge. I was torn between the comfort of seeming safe and the dangerous pull of the possibility of more. Of taking a risk I knew would ripple through every relationship I valued. I remember the moment I realized that I was no longer certain about what I wanted most: the quiet companionship of a long, predictable life, or the electric, tremulous feeling that comes when a person you should not want becomes the only person you cannot stop thinking about. If this confession has you on the edge of your seat, hit like and share, because you will not believe what happens next as the weekend ends and the truth of what we shared refuses to be erased by time or distance. The drive home was a study in silence, each mile peeling back another layer of illusion until I could see the map of my life laid out in front of me, tidy and safe on the dashboard, and then crumpled by the side of the road, where it would be easy to ignore the damage and pretend it never happened. Back in the city, I faced the hardest part of any second chance: telling the truth. I sat with my husband, the man who had stood by me through relocations and late nights and the slow, almost invisible decay of shared dreams, and I spoke with a careful honesty that surprised both of us. The words came out in careful, measured breaths. Every sentence a brick in a bridge I hoped would not collapse beneath us. He listened, not with anger at first, but with a quiet gravity that made me see how much fear I had carried in me for years, how much I had let fear decide for us when love could have done the hard work of healing. We cried, we laughed, we argued, and then we took a breath together and decided on a path that could offer a second chance for our marriage without erasing the honesty we had found. Therapy, more time, and a commitment to rebuild, not just as two separate people who shared a life, but as two people who chose to be present for each other again. The weekend with my best friend's brother had become a weathered map of the heart, teaching me the dangerous, beautiful truth that sometimes love is not a single moment of surrender, but a longer, humbling journey back to what we most desire: to be seen, to be safe, to be brave enough to choose the imperfect yet real second chance over the quiet, safe, but incomplete path I had circled for far too long. The future, I tell myself now, is not a bright, clear line, but a field of possible routes, some rough with brambles and some smooth as summer rain. If there is a promise I hold to with both hands, it is this: love may come in many forms, and second chances may arrive in the most unexpected ways, but the work of keeping it is always ours to do, with humility, patience, and a willingness to grow together. If you crave more raw emotional confessions, please like, share, and subscribe. Your next chapter awaits: emotional storytelling, forbidden love, second chances, mature romance, infidelity in marriage, love after loss, grief and healing, tenant love story, romantic narration, YouTube romance healing through love, slow burn romance, older woman, younger man, heartfelt story, true feelings, emotional connection, faceless love, Olivia and Marcus, narrative romance. Love found me.